Hello again. We're going to talk about sleep and why we sleep. So, what is sleep? Well, first, it's a big chunk of our lives. We spend about a third of our life sleeping. So, if you get to live to the ripe old age of 90, that means you will have spent 30 years sleeping. That's right. You could easily spend 30 years of your life sleeping. It's a natural state, happens every day, or at least it should, and involves a lot of reductions. It's a reduction in motor activity. There's a reduction in the number of calories that your brain consumes. There's a reduction with your ability to perceive what's happening in your environment. Sleep turns out to be as essential as food and water. You cannot go all that long without sleeping. If you're spending 30 years doing something, it must be important. So why do we do it? Well, honestly, scientists don't know. But I'm going to give you 3 theories, and there's evidence to support all of these theories, and they can all be true. They're not mutually exclusive. Okay? The first theory is the restorative hypothesis. And the idea is that you need sleep in order to recharge and regroup, right? So sleep revitalizes us not just physically, but emotionally and intellectually too. People who are ill, who need more time to recover, sleep more. Athletes now are extremely careful about their sleep. They chart it very, very carefully because in order to recover from a challenging game, you need to sleep. Animals with higher metabolisms sleep more. And evidence to support the idea that sleep is about restoring ourselves comes from all sorts of data. So, for example, when do you find the most accidents? Well, about 2 o'clock in the morning, right? When people haven't been getting the sleep that they need. Did you know that driving a car while you've only had 4 or 5 hours sleep makes you as dangerous as someone with a blood alcohol level that reaches legal levels of intoxication? Think about that the next time you're driving. Sleep-deprived people do not drive well. They miss all sorts of things. If you are a betting person and you want to bet on a sports team, not for money, I'm not suggesting anything illegal, but it turns out when people from California, the West Coast, fly back east, you lose 3 hours, right? Because the East Coast is 3 hours ahead of us. As a result of that, West Coast teams playing on the East Coast lose more. They win fewer games than East Coast teams playing on the West Coast, because when you go from east to west, you gain 3 hours. Right? But maybe for students, the most compelling reason for the importance of sleep is GPA. College students who get 6 or fewer hours of sleep a night have a significantly lower GPA than college students who get a good night's sleep every night. Okay, so that's the first hypothesis. What's the second? Well, the second has to do with evolution, that there's an adaptive advantage to us and to other organisms that sleep. So why would that be? Well, animals sleep during the time of day when things are most dangerous for them, right? The chances of being eaten by a predator are greatest. How much an animal sleeps depends on that safety concern as well as the availability of food. Animals that sleep a lot include predators who can just hang out. They don't have to worry about anybody else coming to eat them, as well as animals that are really good at hiding, like bats. They also don't have to worry about somebody coming to get them because they're well hidden. Animals that sleep very little include typically prey, animals that don't have shelter, that can't hide, that might make a tasty meal for another animal. Those are the animals that cannot sleep very much. Also, animals that have to eat all the time, like a horse has to eat constantly. Cattle, you drive by, they're eating all the time because they need to. Okay, the third hypothesis about why we spend 25, 30 years of our lives sleeping has to do with something called the memory consolidation theory. And the idea here is that we need to sleep because during sleep, our brain consolidates or essentially absorbs what we've learned during the day. So for students, this theory, the memory consolidation theory, says you don't want to stay up all night pulling an all-nighter trying to memorize things that you probably don't really understand and foregoing sleep. That's a really bad idea because sleep helps you to remember what you've studied. So you don't want to pass up that sleep. Going without sleep has really detrimental effects for students taking exams. It makes it hard for them to focus. They probably have forgotten everything that they've studied. Sleep turns out to be really important. And I want to tell you about some studies that a wonderful scientist named Bruce McNaughton at the University of Arizona conducted that shows that when you learn something during the day, the same brain areas that were active when you were learning that new thing, they're active when you're sleeping. So what Dr. McNaughton did was to train rats in new kinds of mazes. And then he recorded from a cell, actually while they were learning the maze and after, he recorded from a group of cells called the hippocampal place cells. These are cells in a subregion of the hippocampus that are very sensitive to where an animal or a person is in space. So as these rats were learning new locations in the maze, the hippocampal place cells were active. Well, what happens when those rats go to sleep at night? Guess what? Those hippocampal place cells are active and connecting, and everything that the rat has learned is getting welded into the brain. That's why sleeping is important. But it's not just for rats, it's for humans too. These are some pictures from PET scans of people who have learned a new task. It was a reaction time task, so imagine learning a new video game and someone measures your brain activity as you're learning this new game. And then when you go to sleep that night, they're also measuring your brain activity. And it turns out same brain areas are active at night while you're sleeping as were the brain areas were active when you were learning that new task. So your brain is working with the material that you've just learned. Okay, that's what I'm going to tell you about why we sleep. Come back. We'll learn more about the different stages of sleep.